I'm excited about our first panel. We have a wonderful conversation on how to find alternative ways to monetize your work. So artists with touring on hold and steady income from streaming royalties out of the reach for many working artists. We're going to use this time to discuss the other ways to monetize your work and fund upcoming projects. With the wonderful panelists that we have today, we're going to learn more about how artists are finding supplemental income streams and creating successful projects and campaigns on platforms like Bandcamp, which Marley mentioned, as well as Ample, Kickstarter, Patreon, and what other programs are being rolled out to help artists find new ways of income. I'd like to introduce the moderator, Marcela Murillo Trujano. She's joining us from CD Baby, Mexico, where she is in charge of artist and DSP relations and market development. Her experience in music management has led her to work with top-ranked artists from Mexico and Latin America, and she has collaborated with influential music publications such as Cultura Colectiva and MDM Electro, the most relevant blog for electronic music in Mexico, where she took care of public relations. So please take it away, Marcela.
Hi everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks for having me here. I'm super excited to be moderating this panel, which I believe it's going to be of great use for every artist due to the current situation that we are living and going through right now. So I would like to introduce you to our panelists, who everyone are great people, and I'm really excited to hear from them. We have Meredith Graves, who is a Kickstarter director of music. She is empowering a global network of independent musicians, labels, innovative venues, and groundbreaking institutions to bring creative projects to life. Before she was working at Kickstarter, she spent 2 years hosting MTV News, and she also worked as a freelance music and culture journalist for Pitchfork, the New York Times, The Guardian, Village Voice, among many others. She's also a full-time musician and multidisciplinary artist. From Bandcamp, we have Joe Holt, who is the co-founder and the engineer director at Bandcamp. He has worked in tech and computing for over 40 years, developing creative projects for groundbreaking institutions, including Apple and Bandcamp. He also has engineering credits for versions of Apple iMovie and also components of Acrobat, Photoshop, and Apple Mac OS. His work and creative tech expanded further when he joined Bennington College as a professor of computing in 2005, where he designed courses that combine theory, arts, and technology. From Amplet, we have Austin Robbie, who is the co-founder. Amplet, who is a cooperatively owned web platform that allows musicians to be directly supported by the community. He's interested in the development of alternative economies and building a more democratic, equitable, and inclusive online economy. Finally, we have Ray Saragosa, who is a musician on Patreon, and it's an award-winning singer-songwriter who NPR Music called one of the freshest and compelling voices in folk music today. She's a first-generation Japanese American on her mother's side, indigenous on her father's side, and raised in New York City. So hi everyone, thanks for your time and for being here. I would like to start the conversation if you each could introduce your platform, what is it that you do on a daily basis. So if I'm just gonna start from how I see on the computer. So Meredith, you can go ahead.
Sure. Hi. First off, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining all of us today, and thanks for allowing me to be part of this conversation. My name is Meredith Graves. I use they and she pronouns, and I currently serve as director of music for Kickstarter PBC. Kickstarter is a multinational platform that was the source origin point almost 11 or even a little more years ago now of the idea of and term crowdfunding. Our motto is bringing creative projects to life, but my job might be easier to explain in the context of the wonderful folks who are joining me on this panel today, insofar as you'd start a campaign on Kickstarter to fund or like press to vinyl the album that once finished you would upload to Bandcamp or share with your co-conspirators on Ampled or what have you. We do what we do by providing artists a platform to launch campaigns per project, whether that endeavor is an album, a tour, or a recording studio. They set a goal based off a transparent budget. They share videos, they write stories, elaborating on the making of and the intention behind their project, and their backers get rewards off of their campaign in exchange for their emotional and financial and technical support. So we are, in brief, the OG, I think the term is, for crowdfunding. And what I do all day is have fun lending, again, emotional, technical, and creative support to artists at all stages of the creative process, from barely having an idea all the way through launching and fulfilling their campaign and well beyond.
Amazing, awesome, thank you. We can move on with Joe.
Hey, I'm Joe Holt. I'm a co-founder of Bandcamp and currently an engineering director with a small group that works on leading edge tech for Bandcamp's next features. I like to think of Bandcamp as an online record store and a music community. I started Bandcamp with 3 friends of mine in 2008. And really, we just wanted to help our friends who are musicians, and by extension, anyone, be more successful with their music. We've tried hard over the years to be fair and transparent. You know, when a lot of musicians on the site are friends of yours, you want to do that. And we've earned a reputation for being very artist friendly. Our business model is pretty simple. We take a % of sales, averaging about 11%. That aligns our business interests with the artists. When artists are when artists are successful, we're successful. Basically, we, as Bandcamp, you know, make money, make profits when artists make a whole lot more money and profits. There are hundreds of thousands of living, breathing, great music-making artists on Bandcamp. Since we started, fans have purchased over $500 million worth of stuff, which just blows me away. And every day now, they're buying 65,000 records from all over the world. This is my first Wavelengths conference, by the way. Thanks for the invitation. Thanks, Morley, for setting such a beautiful vibe. I was nervous at the beginning, and Morley just made me like just feel so much more present. Morley mentioned the healing power of art, and that reminded me. I'm a big Prince fan. All of my friends know not to bring Prince up around me, or I'll just talk their ear off. And in his last year of life, he started writing an autobiography. And when he sat down with his collaborator, he told the writer, "Music is healing. Write that down first." And that's what I believe too. I'm greatly impressed by all of you. So many wonderful people here supporting artists. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe, for the intro. Austin, you're up.
Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Austin, and I am a co-founder of Ampled. I use he, him pronouns. I'm based in San Antonio, Texas right now, but I'm moving back to New York on Monday, driving with my dog, who you might be able to see in the bottom corner of my screen. Ampled is a web platform, which for this crowd, I think it'd be easiest to describe as like a Patreon-like utility for musicians that is collectively owned by artists and workers. So something that we believe is critical to expanding equity and prosperity for musicians and workers alike is through solidarity and collective ownership. So what we have done is build a platform not through venture capital funding, but through collective labor, and are a co-op. So being a co-op means that we are collectively owned on a one member, one share, one vote basis. So there's no any one person that has any outsized ownership or control as anyone else. And I think that's an important next step that, you know, we'd like to explore and see more in the platform economy. And I think, you know, specifically through musicians and in a music ecosystem in 2021 and beyond, we have think 16 worker owners now. A handful of them are actually former Kickstarter people. We have some former Patreon people on it too. So we're kind of like, guess like the labor rights side hustle for some people that have worked at their crowdfunding platforms. And we're pretty new, so I wouldn't be surprised if most people haven't heard of us, but we just think we're about to cross 400 artists signing up now. And yeah, looking forward to speaking with everyone here.
Thank you. Thanks. We are over with Ray.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Cool. It's such an honor to be on this panel. Really, really amazing. I'm just very excited to learn from everyone as well. And so my name is Ray Saragosa. I'm an independent singer, songwriter, composer, musician, and I've been on Patreon for, in a few weeks, it'll be 3 years. And I have a little over 200 patrons who support me monthly. I make about twice my rent on Patreon, and it definitely has been this saving grace during COVID. Before, quarantine and lockdown, I was a full-time touring artist, and I was touring for basically 3 years straight. And my Patreon went from, a smaller portion of my income to the whole thing during COVID. And so it's been really an amazing opportunity to share that knowledge I gained over 3 years on Patreon with other DIY artists and independent artists. And I just released a new record called Woman in Color on October 22nd, 23rd. And I released this record on my own record label called Rebel River Records that I started with my Patreon community. And so I consider every single member of my Patreon a shareholder in my record, and they are my label team, and they help choose the songs for this record, and they help on they get to see everything first. And so it's been a really cool way to take my Patreon community to a next level of being an actual label that is registered and everything. So yeah, I've just always been really passionate about finding different ways to be a sustainable artist without relying on other people in a way, like with a major record label or anything like that. So yep.
Well, that's amazing. I think that would really take us to our first question to open up the panel. So how are artists, independent labels, like venues, are finding supplemental income streams during this time? Just like, as you mentioned, what are other ways that artists are finding this source of income? Anyone who would like to start, just please go ahead.
You mean from the public, from anybody who's listening?
No, from our panelists.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. So if we want to start with Meredith, would you want to start?
Yeah, forgive me. I would ask you one more time to kindly repeat the question because my internet glitches a little bit.
No problem. How are artists, independent labels and artists are finding new sources of income? Just like Ray mentioned that she has been, she founded her label from her Patreon and.
So specific to Kickstarter?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool. So actually pretty shortly after the pandemic started, well, I started myself to deem it a canary in the coal mine, right? Even in the United States where we're located and where I am presently, we were a little behind the rest of the world's curve in terms of deciphering the early craziness of COVID-19, right? So for a lot of people here in the States, it was actually South by Southwest getting canceled that really led a lot of us onto the fact that this is real, correct? So we're all the way back there in March of last year. We're already starting to get little chicken legs scared. And we should have been, right? We had the right idea. So we start to get a couple of months into it. And of course, if we knew where we would be now, then at the time, we just knew we had to act fast. And so I was very lucky in April and May of 2020 to work with just about everybody else at Kickstarter to develop a pioneering program that we ended up expanding all the way up to it being presented at the World Economic Forum. But really, it's had a crucial home on our site since April of last year. And that's a program that we developed called Lights On. It doesn't do anything fundamentally different with the base structure of Kickstarter, but it rhetorically leverages some of our looser rules to account for types of projects that aren't traditional to our artist making a thing type model. How this started was with St. Vitus, which is, if you're not familiar, is a super beloved metal and extreme music venue here in Brooklyn, New York. I've played a bazillion shows there over the years myself, but so have thousands of other people, right? It's a home away from home for like hashers all over the world. They needed to run a campaign to help take care of their staff and keep their venue like popping. We can't lose Vitus, right? So they came to me because we know each other. I said, well, this isn't really what Kickstarter is here for, right? We're here for people who want to make a record or movie or this, that, or the. We went, no. What's the rule as it's written? Kickstarter campaigns need to have unique rewards. The idea that your campaign has to just be for the reward, though, is a popular misconception based off 11 years of people replicating each other's behavior on our site. So we took St. Vitus and tried something new, and we ended up developing a program where we bent the rule to actually read, Kickstarter campaigns involve rewards you can't get anywhere else. They made one piece of merch and solicited the remainder of their rewards from bands that have played there over their 11-year history, which is how we got everything from like bass lessons from people from Anthrax to like cell phone swapping cat pics with other people from your favorite bands to old show flyers to, you know, opportunities you really couldn't get anywhere else. Kickstarter was so excited about me really breaking our rules, I have to admit it. We spun it up into a whole campaign that's actually since helped about 107 venues worldwide, not just venues, but also institutions, some of which are organizations in the cities where they're based that are meant to now go forward and distribute aid to other music institutions in crisis, like NYC Nightlife United here in New York, which was founded on Kickstarter as well. But venues, we've helped folks from right here in Brooklyn, as mentioned, to Tokyo, to Halifax, to, you know, there could be a place in your town. So that's the big thing that we pioneered this year, where we saw artists getting really, really creative with the use of our platform. And if anyone wants to see that, you can go to Kickstarter, and right there on the front page, there'll be a big banner that says Lights On. It was really important for me to work really, really fast and try to come up with something, whatever I could, quite literally, to try and help. Kickstarter really is people. It's a group of people that hang out together all day and like art and happen to run this site. So I really couldn't be prouder of the work that we put into this. And record stores, venues, businesses, labels, small institutions, you're not just welcome, but totally encouraged to seek this out if you think it's something you might benefit from.
Well, yeah, I think most of us were worried, about how our art is going to make it throughout all of this time. But it's also the venues that have been struggling so much. And I've seen it through also friends of mine who are actually based in Brooklyn, and they work in nightlife, and they've been having such a hard time, like going through the pandemic. And I believe that this is one of the most innovative ways to help them out. So really congrats on that as well.
Thank you so much. I hope you don't mind. I'll put a link in the chat for people who are curious and learning more.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, so our next question goes, I would say for Joe and Ray, how are artists creating successful projects and campaigns on different platforms? What's the key to finding success in being able to go from an idea to actually executing it?
Go ahead, Ray.
Go ahead, Joe. Did you want me to start? Or I wasn't sure.
Go ahead. Marcella asked us both. I'll let.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, what's been great with Patreon is, since the pandemic started, I've been doing, working with people one-on-one to help launch their own Patreons, and also been doing like these workshops to get people who are just getting started. And what I always say to folks is that I think what works best especially right now with what's going on and with these ways to get people to have like this exclusive access into your work is to really get very personal with it and to share things, share the difficult times and share like the really good times with your fans, and that they want to be on this process with you, and like transparency and, just really taking them on that journey with you, I think is what makes Patreon and what makes, these exclusive platforms so enticing to fans and to followers. And so also like asking, what I've been doing with my Patreon following during the pandemic is like asking like, you know, I'm home more. Like what, like here's a poll of things like I want to do. Like what would be most exciting for you to like come along on the journey with, like more poetry from home, or like more, you know, video diaries, or more, you know, live streams from home. And I think really what I've found works most is that, you know, when you're building these online exclusive platforms for your like super fans, is to really build it as a community, and more so than like something where it's like, okay, I'm the artist and I'm bringing something to you, but really it's more of like a community. And like I think a lot of people are on my Patreon because it's been this like sense of like family and community during a really tough time in the world. And I think that you know, the music is what brought us there, but really everyone kind of stays for the community. So I feel like people, you know, they come for the music and they stay for the community. So whenever I tell people, you know, how to retain fans on Patreon, or how to really bring people in and have them stay, it's like show them that there's value, that they're there, you know, and that you need them as much as they need your music, and that it's like a very symbiotic relationship. And so I think that's like the number one thing that I see with the most success of Patreon campaigns, or like, you know, Patreon communities, is that real sense of like we're all in this together and this is a community.
That's very cool, Ray, and important too, especially now. I think that personal connection is really the most important thing. Meredith, thanks for telling more about what you've done for venues. That's super cool. Yeah, this year has been difficult. In March at Bandcamp, we decided to have a fundraiser where we would waive our share of sales and pass all of that on to the artists for 24 hours. And we did that on Friday, March 20th, and it was really successful. People showed up. It really knocked us out. We saw 15 times more traffic and commerce on the site than on a normal Friday. The site sort of struggled for a bit, and my team had to do some work afterwards to make sure that we didn't crash again. But it was great. So we decided to do that again. We made it a regular thing last year. We called them Bandcamp Fridays. We've had nine of them so far, and they've just been really, really successful. They've become kind of a thing now, which is great for everybody. Artists and fans look forward to them. And artists are now making special releases just to release on those Fridays, or finding things from their back catalog that or finding something in the basement that, you know, they have a box of that they, you know, put up on the site as special merch just for that Friday, and fans show up. Fans wish list things that they want to buy on that day. It's been great, and we're going to keep doing that for the foreseeable future.
Awesome. So putting everything, you know, in some words, it's important to get personal with your fans, to be transparent, do some special releases for them, involve them, make them feel that they are part of your decision-making process, and create a community where people can find support with each other as well. So now that we know, you know, like a little bit more of the inside, what are other new programs? I will ask Austin this, resources and changes that are being rolled out that can help artists find success in 2021 from your perspective and from what you're doing as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think what this year has clearly illuminated with everyone talking on this panel is a greater shift towards reliance on platforms. Like, you know, maybe even using them in a way that, you know, we need to change, you know, the rules so venues can benefit. You know, Ray, I applaud. I think it's so cool that you're paying rent through your patrons. I think that's really cool. And Bandcamp Fridays have been like critical. Like it's been this thing. It's like it's been such a yeah, this critical thing that like the whole music ecosystem needs. And I guess like in framing the answer of like what is next and what kind of shifts are needed from here, you know, I think that maybe the flip side of this reliance or greater shift towards the platform economy maybe invites new questions or maybe new scrutiny potentially of of how our platform economy works. I think Kickstarter and Bandcamp are two of the best examples out there. A unionized public benefit corporation and like kind of like the coolest bootstrapped platform. But I mean, oh, and you know, again, Ray, I think it's so cool that you've built this community and you've like kind of taken these ideas of like collective democratic governance with your patrons in a really cool way. I think it's worth examining, maybe looking under the hood more now. Like questions, the two questions that we encourage people to start asking more frequently and more critically are who owns it and who controls it. I think that's the other side of like controlling your creative practice, owning your creative practice. That it could potentially be dangerous on a platform like Patreon that is majority owned by venture capitalists. And TechCrunch has said that the two most likely acquirers could be Google or Facebook. So I think it's worth looking at some of the economic operating systems on which the platforms are built, because control and ownership over our creative practices can only go so far without a reassurance that the rug can't be pulled out from under artists or rules can't just change and suddenly there's a different fee structure. So I think like that is kind of like, you know, the vision that we'd like to see at Ampled is an ecosystem of lots of platforms that we can choose from that are self-directed from artists and workers with aligned interest, aligned financial interests, and also collective democratic control. I think this reliance on platforms means that we have to start thinking about how to like fundamentally and structurally align the interests of artists so that these platforms don't become misaligned.
That's really cool, Austin. I had the fortune to talk to Austin last week, and we got a lot deeper into this. And Austin helped me think about a lot of new things that were very cool. It's kind of a, you know, I don't want to say like far out idea because these are things that we can do now, and obviously Austin is doing them now. But there's a long-term vision of this from my point of view, where we shift where your community, where your data, where your music lives. You know, right now you've got a Bandcamp community with Bandcamp followers and Patreon community and Patreon followers. I'd like to see a future not too far out where those are your followers, Ray. You know, Bandcamp doesn't own them on its service. They belong to you and some, you know, Ray private, you know, box that, you know, we ask your permission. Can we send this email to your followers? Can we promote this thing on your behalf? You know, we would be a service that, you know, you'd opt into and let us do these things for you, but it's your stuff.
Yeah, these are such great points, Austin. I really resonate with everything you said. I think I first heard about Ampled through my friend Lizzie No, who has an Ampled account, and we were doing a piece for Talkhouse about the difference between tokenization and inclusion, which is just a little shout out if anyone wants to read that. It's really cool, and Lizzie No shouts out her Ampled account. But anyway, it's really you know, fascinating to think about, because I think the reason I got on Patreon in the first place was wanting to have more of a sense of ownership, because I would say that a majority of my fans are on Instagram. And on these platforms where these algorithms are working against us and they're trying to keep us from our fans. And I kind of got my start building a fan base was through Facebook, and having a song kind of go a little like viral on Facebook, which would never have happened now with the way the algorithms work. And what had gone viral was like the slightest bit political. So like there's no way that would have happened now. And so it's fascinating. So, you know, I think that that is like the future, and the goal is to have a way that that artists can have more ownership of the data of like our fans' email addresses and the ways that we can connect with them, because that feeling of having the rug pulled out under us from these platforms that we put so much trust in is absolutely terrifying, like you said, Austin. And so it's really, really great to think about. And yeah, we want to have so much trust in the platforms that we use, and that going towards a way of like, you know, really knowing where our, you know, who's in control of the data is so, so important. And I think that's why what's also difficult is like, if you hear someone snoring next to me, it's my little dog. But you know, with mailing lists, like the way of like owning our data was like to have a really good mailing list and to collect your emails from different platforms. But now even with mailing lists, everything's going into like the promotions folder, and it's getting harder and harder for artists to directly connect with our fans. And so yeah, anyway, this is just such incredible thoughts. And yeah, I hope we can move towards a direction where we have that direct, you know, way and get to own everything that we're sharing as well.
I love the idea of like interoperability. If you could just port your supporters to another platform as well. I mean, like Bandcamp is able to say that because they don't have like investors breathing down their necks, and like we're able to say that because as a co-op, like we're fundamentally wired to like as a motivation to meet member needs, not to seek profit. And so I think like that's like a fundamental difference of like where, you know, if you think of like behaviors that a platform would make, I think like what we would say is like a lot of times you just see the incentives. That's what determines behaviors. And a lot of times ownership determines incentives. Um, and yeah, I think like that's a goal for Ample to just be able to like the best way to meet artist needs, if you view it through that lens, would be to allow people to leave and not be a walled garden or like proprietary moat that locks people in.
Great. Thank you for all the input on that subject. Before we move on to the questions, can each one of you give us, you know, like one last tip, recommendation, or best practice to use your platform or Ray for creating content? Meredith?
Yeah, I'm happy to go first. Really quick though, that entire conversation was just galaxy brain. Like, hell yeah, Austin, you're so smart. I love talking to you and hearing Ray's firsthand artist-based accounts, and Joe being able to back us up from like the greatest factor of common good in music at present being Bandcamp. Like, thank you all. There's not a lot of future to believe in at the moment. Hearing the three of you talk is dope. Thank you so much. And yes to all. What I would advise people on. So like Kickstarter's been around a long time. Depending on what category you're launching in and where you look, you're going to get a lot of advice, and it's going to start to look like word salad if you start to look at too much of it, right? We have a help center with tons of practical advice. But here's a tiny bit of inside baseball that I must stress for music creators. You have to think outside the 12-inch, right? And what I mean by that is human behavior dictates human behavior. If you look at Kickstarter music and 10, 11 years of projects historically, you will primarily see a use case of a band making an album, whether that's a band funding the recording of an album, or the band funding the recording and pressing of an album, or the pressing of a reissue. It's band making album. What I want to stress to people in this year and in the year ahead, with things like Lights On, but other stuff, it's not just that. And in fact, we've supported music documentaries, we've supported music videos, we've supported books, we've supported instruments, we've had guitar pedals, we've had venues, we've had the restoration of historical homes of musicians. I have helped on all of these and more, you know, fanzines. Kickstarter music is for music as broad as we want to define it. And so if there's really one thing I want to encourage, and this is a creative request coming from me too, I want to see a broader diversity of artists on our site. And so the biggest tip being, yeah, think outside of the box in terms of what you think is a possible project to fund publicly. Usually the reverse shot of that I find myself saying to people is, you're already doing so much more than you give yourself credit for. And we know better than to believe one must absolutely play shredding guitar solos in order to participate in music. So if you've been photographing bands from the pit for 20 years, email me. If you have discovered and unearthed a lost tape from your grandmother's teenage acoustic guitar recording sessions back in Switzerland, please email me. Like, it doesn't have to be you. It doesn't have to be your band. Success is like right there for a ton of projects in a very broad variety of disciplines. So hopefully that's kind of maybe useful, maybe inspiring. I don't know. I just want people to come get weird. Like, we're ready for you.
Okay, so people get weird to to succeed. Joe.
Well, that reminds me of, yeah, all the non-traditional releases that people have put up on Bandcamp. I had a former student at Bennington College who was a musician, and he makes he was making a song a day for years and years and years. His name's Jonathan Mann, and you know, there's no like album. You know, you can buy a collection of a year, and in the early days of Bandcamp, someone purchased one of those and actually crashed the site because it was like 365 tracks. These are good good crashes to have. It shows that people are being creative. I want to give just a very simple, straightforward, practical bit of advice for people using Bandcamp. Just realize that Bandcamp isn't exclusive. Like, you know, get your music everywhere you can, you know, get it to where anybody who's looking for it can find it. You know, a lot of artists have their own music sites with their own stores, which is great. You know, sell things however you want. Just, you know, make sure you've got a Bandcamp link in there. Just let people who are familiar with Bandcamp, who have accounts there, who like to keep their collections there, you know, link to that too. For the people who are doing a lot of stuff, there's a feature on Bandcamp to create subscriptions, not for like all music, but just for an artist. Kind of like a Patreon, but it's more about you know, their releases. So create that. If you're the kind of musician who has a lot that you want to release, or that you just make a lot of things like Jonathan Mann every day, consider creating a subscription and let the fans who like that kind of thing, you know, give you monthly or yearly amounts. It evens out your income. You know, you're not doing this like album release spike and then trying to make that last for a while.
Thank you, Joe. Austin.
The yeah, the point about getting weird makes sense because at one point Kickstarter was really weird. It was like something that no one thought would ever work. And then Amanda Palmer like proved that it could, like very definitively. Um, yeah, I think and I mean the culture has shifted so much that you know, in 2 years the idea of like a direct patronage being like a main source of support, like you know, I think it carried a little bit of like a stigma. I think crowdfunding can people are, you know, I think there's some like psychological and cultural barriers to asking for money. I think like that's shifted a bit. And yeah, I think there's like a lot more forgiveness now of getting weird, which is a good thing, and just experimenting and trying new stuff. So like yeah, one example of an artist on Ampled is a professional musician, but just post cooking videos on his Ampled page. It's like his side hobby, and has like a little cooking show on Ampled, and I think that's awesome.
And so going outside of, you know, only the music stuff and kind of engaging with also your personal life, like Ray mentioned. So from content, Ray, what would you recommend everyone?
Yeah, I definitely want to echo this get weird thing. I love it. And I think definitely, um, you know, I think that like the most popular content on a lot of my platforms, but especially on my Patreon, is things that have nothing to do with my music, actually. And I write a poem every Tuesday, and that gets the most engagement out of anything I post on Patreon. And there's no music to that; it's just words. And um, you know, I think that what I like, kind of echoing what I said before about community, it's like, folks are there to support you as a human being, not only you as an artist. And so they want to hear about, hear your poems, see your recipes and your cooking, and hear about my dog, and like kind of see me as like this human being. And I think that's what I think has been one of the most wonderful parts about where the music industry has gone. I think that like this whole mysterious like artist that's like in the very like distant and like, so elusive and mysterious, like those days are gone. And now it's like you really want to get to know the artist and get really close to them and see what they're all about. And so I think with content, it really, yeah, like getting weird and strange and whatever is just on your heart and really showing your true colors is like what will get people most engaged. And also like echoing what Joe said, yeah, like having a band camp for me, in addition to my Patreon and in addition to like everything else I do, is so valuable, because like Patreon and like other and Kickstarter and like Ample and like a lot of these platforms and Bandcamp, there are people who are fans of the platforms who end up finding me that way. Like I know I have so many people who are like Bandcamp fans who only support my music through Bandcamp because they love Bandcamp. And so making sure that your music and your content is on everything as much as possible, even if you have one main focus, is so important, because you never know like who's going to be fans of those platforms are going to find you that way.
Thank you. Thanks, Ray. And we have our first question that kind of goes tapping a little bit into what you just mentioned. It's from Liv Sofer. It seems like it would be lucrative for artists to tap into all of these platforms, yet also would stretch and overwhelm their supporters. Do you have examples or stories of your artists that have had strategic success across tapping into more than one platform or community? Or does it make sense to have, Kickstarter and Patreon for an album release?
Uh, my platform's the one that got name dropped, so I'll field that one. This is something I endorse really heavily, actually, especially for, I think, all right, this might even be a little bit myopic, but hopefully it'll answer your question, right? You can't hold me down. I do like 400 things, right? And the idea on the reverse side of that are, in my head anyway, the kind of people who would look at an artist who tried something else and say, why don't you just shut up and play the hits, man? So like that makes it a really clearly delineated breakdown between those two systems to me, right? Patreon is where your regular fans will have access to, like Ray said, all of the personal, innovative, sort of like creative stuff that you're doing all the time that, as mentioned, people really, really do want to see. Kickstarter can sync up there directly one music, do a larger album project here, get consistent regular support from your fan community during the rest of the time also. But what I love to see is stuff like, well, a classic example of this for me, weirdly enough, is the Aquabats. If people are like some ska fans in the room, the Aquabats are hysterical. They've been a band forever. They've been salient forever. They've been touring forever. They come to Kickstarter to make a TV show. So that's one way those things can sync up. I'd be remiss to only suggest, if we're already going to talk about daisy chaining a bunch of platforms together, like we would guitar pedals or something, right? Trying to get them all to do the same thing. That's what's going to overwhelm your fans. If you're the type of person who, like me, is a little executive dysfunction-y and enjoys having your fingers in a lot of pies at once, there's something really cool about coordinating these platforms to serve different purposes. It's also a way to get engaged with the technology as an artist. I know I sometimes refer to myself as Lord of Guitars. Like I struggle sending emails some days, let alone uploading my own music to platforms. But like one way to get immersed in technology without feeling like you have to be a high security clearance computer wizard to do it is to try creative efforts on these different platforms and focus like very hard on the work you're putting up there and diversify that between things as opposed to just leaning hard into one area of technology. So hopefully that makes sense. I think practically, yeah, ongoing support versus periodic support for larger projects. I think those larger projects can be diversified past band makes album. If, for instance, you wanted to do a book, a zine, a film, something like that. But I also think it's a good way for artists to explore technologies. This is what I'm trying to say, forgive me, always takes me a minute. Explore technologies as if they're instruments or genres. Chaining them together in that way might bring about something beautiful.
Cool. Yeah. To me, it's all about the hustle. You know, it's doing what you can to get your stuff out there in front of as many people as want to find you. The question was examples of artists who have success this way, and everybody that I can think of has a presence on YouTube, on Patreon, have done campaigns on Kickstarter, have music for sale on Bandcamp. I would encourage any artist who has a presence already to find one more thing, you know, find one more platform, become familiar with it, try to make it part of your larger reach. I have a friend, Sam Amadon, who's a musician. And if you Google his name, you'll see it everywhere, you know. And when I am following his social media, it's like, oh, he's over on, you know, Twitch now doing a show. Oh, he's got a YouTube show. Oh, he's doing a Bandcamp live show. Oh, his things are on sale here. That can seem a little overwhelming, you know. He's been doing it for a while. But if you can find just, you know, one new platform, maybe Austin's, to put your music on and to make part of your larger ecosystem of connecting and community.
I would say that I agree with that. I think we also I mean, I get platform fatigue like anybody else. I'm on like 10 chat apps a day, like for different things. But I do think that the healthiest kind of like platform economy for musicians will be one with choice, where there's not the expectation that one platform does everything, or that every artist has to be on the same one. So I think, like, you know, a diverse ecosystem of different platforms to choose from is probably like the healthiest thing for artists, rather than a limited choice.
Yeah, I think that Meredith, what you were saying was like so fascinating to me. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna write a book and put it on Kickstarter. But yeah, I think that makes so much sense. And because I think if you're doing an album, to have like two like identical album campaigns on like Kickstarter and Patreon would be confusing for folks. But if you're doing different projects on different things, it makes a lot of sense. What I did with my Patreon when I was raising funds for this record is I kind of like set goals as if it was like a Kickstarter. So I was like, okay, well, if we reach this goal by this day, this will happen, you know? And so that really helped, because on Patreon, it's not the same kind of thing where like you need to reach a goal, but you can like set your own goals and advertise those to your followers. And that'll like create that sense of urgency. And then I kind of want to echo like this question I saw in the chat that's related about like how much time do you dedicate, because you know you also have to make your art and you also have to do all these things, and like if you're on like 20 different platforms, like how do you do that? And what I always tell people is like with anything, especially with like my Patreon, I'm always trying to share things rather than like create it specifically for Patreon. So I write poetry like all day, every day. So I'm going to put some of the poetry on Patreon. I like to write a song, you know, at least a couple times a week. Just put those on Patreon. Just like set up a camera. It doesn't have to be anything too fancy. You know, I make a new meal, or I like play with my dog, or like do these funny things, like kind of share what you're already creating, so it doesn't feel like it's like, oh, this is like some kind of thing that's outside of creating my art. It really is just like a place of sharing your art rather than taking you away from it. And yeah, it feels like you're in front of a screen all the time and you're doing all these things with the platforms. But I think once you really tap into that, like getting weird with it and making sure you're just like funneling your creativity into the platform rather than feeling like you have to focus on creating new content for every single thing and like, you know, it be like a strain. I think it should only be, you know, it should be, you should be sharing more so than like just it should never be a creative burden, in my opinion.
I just want to chime in really quick. I read an essay on the Creative Independent, part of Kickstarter, by Courtney Cassidy, and I really loved her essay and signed up for a mail blog, like a physical blog to be mailed to my house. So it's possible, like, we use the term platform, but it doesn't have to actually be like tech driven.
We have time for one last question. So if anyone wants to, you know, unmute themselves and just go ahead and ask.
I'd like to ask a question. It's actually one that Zach asked in the chat. And that has to do with working with artists from other countries who don't speak English as a primary language and don't always have steady access to the internet, let alone electricity. So there's a lot of challenges there dealing with those situations. And we would be curious to hear about any examples you might have of working with artists in some of these kinds of situations, any success stories.
Yeah, thanks. This is a really great question. And Allison, thank you for repeating it. Kickstarter is a multinational, like, we're going to get into as many countries as we can. And I think we're already operative in like 50 plus with all these different languages. I refer to us frequently and loudly as a borderless nation state. We just kind of subsume the globe in a big group hug and we try to help people. So I've worked with North African rock and roll bands. I've worked with, really recently, we just launched in 3 new countries, Poland, Slovenia, and Greece. And I handled one of the first Polish music projects, which is actually Brazil, but he lives in Poland. So yeah, we actually do a lot of this, right? And so maybe the flip side of that is that the answer is not that interesting. Like, I do this. And when it comes to things like artists that have lower quality internet connections, I reschedule with them a dozen times until we get a call that works. You know, if people need support, I personally make every adjustment humanly possible to meet or exceed my creators' personal comfort boundaries when it comes to their preferred methods of communication. Zoom fatigue is a thing, but like in other instances, it may either be a person's neural model of learning, or it could be a language concern. It could be lots of different things. So that's one thing where I feel like tech is a big part of that conversation, but like tech is people. Otherwise, it's an active hallucination to consider there being a tech without the people that run it. So like us as individuals who are part of the tech and the creative sector need to approach that question as individuals on these platforms or who are part of these platforms. I think as it is our personal responsibility first to start working with creators and artists in these places until the tech adapts, until colonialism, globalization, white supremacy, resource derivation, become less of a violent global issue. It's on us as individuals with our feet in the industry to try and do the best we can and fight for more, I think. But until that point, I will just keep rescheduling and rescheduling and rescheduling and sending emails and trying to help. I think hopefully that's like an okay answer, at least from our corner.
I appreciate your dedication, Meredith. That really is encouraging to hear. There are a lot of there are a lot of challenges in some of these places. So I understand, but it's really great to hear that you're willing to keep rescheduling until it does work. So that's very helpful to know.
I can also add to that. I'm from Mexico, so here it's been a little bit complicated when artists want to sell their tickets online because a lot of people don't own credit cards and don't have the possibility to buy online. So what I've been doing personally also with some of the artists that I work with is adjusting to the market. You know, I think knowledge is power. And since we know that a lot of people are not able to buy online, we partner up with some other companies that let people go and pay for their tickets in convenience stores. So I think getting to know your audience and how each market works, it's also a key, point to make it work. Okay, so I think, yeah, I'm not really sure if we have time for another question, so I would just close this up and thank everyone for your time, for being here. I'm pretty sure that everyone who joined is really happy and is taking a lot with them from all of our panelists. So thank you guys for your time and for being here. And yeah, I hope to see you soon.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great Saturday.
Thank you to Marcella and for all of our wonderful panelists. That was such an exciting conversation. I'm greatly looking forward to all the ways in which all of you and our artists get even weirder and sharing more dynamic content. It's so nice to know the human faces behind these platforms that are making such a difference for artists.